Okay, but look, most business owners out there are convinced that their biggest problem, the absolute only thing standing between them and the success they envisioned when they started, is that they just need more leads.
And that is almost never the real problem.
I mean, if they could just get the phone to ring maybe 5 more times a day, everything's magically solved.
Right. But if your underlying business engine has a leak, pouring more leads into it is just going to create a significantly more expensive mess.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental misdiagnosis of where the actual pain is coming from. And unfortunately, that misdiagnosis costs independent business owners hundreds of thousands of dollars over the lifespan of their companies.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. Because that perspective completely flies in the face of what everyone is told, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If you go online right now and search for business advice, I mean, 99% of the results are about lead generation.
It's top of funnel marketing, getting more eyeballs.
Exactly. But today, we're going on a specific mission to find your invisible money. Because if you're listening to this right now, you, the business owner who started this whole journey, because you were just incredibly good at a specific trade or skill, you know, the feeling we're talking about.
Yeah, that initial hustle phase.
Right. For a while, just being the absolute best at what you did in your local area was enough. You relied on word of mouth, you hustled, you grew.
Well, then you hit that wall.
You hit the wall.
Yeah.
The work stops feeling like forward progress. You are working harder than you ever have. You're getting more clients. You're pushing through those slow months, doing exactly what the conventional advice says you should do.
And then you sit down at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, look at the bank account, and the math just isn't mathing.
It's just not mathing. So our goal today is to uncover why that just get more leads advice is dangerously incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to systematically find exactly where your business is actually leaking profit.
Because it is incredibly common. Honestly, it's probably the most frustrating plateau a business owner can hit.
Yeah.
They look at their top line revenue, which, might actually be growing beautifully year over year.
The gross looks great.
Exactly. But the profit, the actual money that stays in the business to build wealth, to provide security, it's shrinking. Or it's completely stagnant.
Because they've been conditioned by this whole industry of marketers to think customer acquisition cures every operational disease.
They assume the money they're desperately trying to find is out there somewhere, hidden in some new ad channel.
A newly optimized funnel.
Right, or some sophisticated SEO strategy. But the truth is, the invisible money they are searching for is already sitting right inside their current business.
It's flowing through their hands every single week.
Every week. But nobody's looking for it because everyone is too busy staring out the front door waiting for the next customer to walk in.
Which brings us to a massive distinction we need to establish right out of the gate. We need to clearly delineate the difference between a business management consultant and a marketing consultant.
Huge difference.
Because if you have a profit problem and your immediate reaction is to go out and hire a marketing consultant or a new ad agency, you are essentially hiring a plumber to fix your electrical wiring.
That is a very accurate way to frame it. Because a marketing consultant is entirely focused on the top of the funnel. Their mandate is purely to bring in new customer interest.
Right. Paid ads, SEO, billboards.
Making the phone ring. And I want to be clear, that function has tremendous, undeniable value. You absolutely need top-of-funnel interest to survive.
Obviously.
However, a business management consultant focuses on everything that happens the second after that interest shows up.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So they look at the structural integrity of the container you are pouring those leads into. They analyze how the business converts those inquiries into paying clients, how efficiently the team actually serves those clients, how the business keeps those clients coming back so they don't have to, pay to acquire them all over again.
Right.
And crucially, how the business prices those services so that the work being done is actually generating a net profit rather than just generating busy work.
Okay, I want to push back on that for a second, just to play the skeptic here. Because I can hear the counter-argument forming for a lot of hardworking operators out there.
Sure.
If I'm a business owner and my margins are feeling a little tight, why shouldn't I just focus on making the business bigger? Like, if I double my revenue by aggressively pouring money into top-of-funnel marketing, won't the math just eventually work itself out through economies of scale?
You'd think so.
Doesn't volume eventually cure everything?
It is remarkably tempting to believe that.
Yeah.
And it's a myth that gets perpetuated constantly. But volume only cures everything if the underlying operational system is fundamentally sound.
Because if it's not.
Think about the unit economics of a service. If you have a poorly designed business where every new client practically costs you more in labor, overhead, and administrative drag than they actually bring in, doubling your volume does not fix your
It
margin.
just doubles the bleeding.
You're just accelerating the speed at which you are failing. And you're burning out yourself and your team in the process.
Wow.
This is exactly why a diagnostic first approach is absolutely critical before you spend another dime on growth. Consider the medical field.
Oh,
Imagine you walk into a doctor's exam room. You sit down, you're feeling terrible, and before you can even open your mouth to explain your symptoms, the doctor walks in, hands you a heavy prescription, and just walks out.
I would assume the doctor was a complete fraud. I certainly wouldn't take the medication.
Right.
They didn't take my blood pressure. They didn't ask where it hurts. Didn't run a single lab test.
They're just guessing based on the fact that you walked into a clinic. And yet this exact dynamic happens in the business consulting and agency world every single day.
Oh, totally. An agency rep walks in, completely skips the diagnostic phase, and immediately hands the owner a thick, complex 3-year plan.
Or a brand new, expensive ad strategy they prescribe before they examine. And any professional who skips the diagnostic step is just guessing. Sometimes, by pure luck, they guess right. But most of the time, they guess wrong. And you, the business owner, the patient, in this scenario, you pay the incredibly high price for that guess.
Because a true business management consultant operates like a specialized physician.
Exactly. They ask detailed questions before they ever offer advice. They run the tests to find the root cause of the margin compression before they prescribe a structural fix.
That diagnostic analogy actually connects perfectly to the background of the expert whose methodology we're diving into today, because the source material for this deep dive comes from Ryan Herrst, the author of Profit Foundation.
Yeah, his background is fascinating.
It really is, because his background isn't in traditional corporate finance. His background is actually in ICU and surgical nursing.
Which is wild when you think about it.
Talk about a high-stakes environment where you absolutely cannot afford to just guess. That high-pressure medical background directly shapes this root cause diagnostic approach to business advisory work.
Right, because in an ICU, you don't just treat the fever because it's the most obvious symptom. You have to find the underlying infection, or the patient doesn't make it.
The translation from the intensive care unit to business operations is surprisingly direct.
In an ICU, everything is about triage and vital signs. You would never look at a patient who is struggling to breathe and say, let's just crank up the oxygen without first checking their blood pressure.
Checking their heart rate, reviewing the lab panels.
Exactly. In business, top-line revenue is just one single vital sign. If you only look at revenue, but you completely ignore client retention, lead conversion rates, profit margins, you're essentially committing business malpractice.
You are treating a symptom while ignoring the disease.
Exactly. And speaking of the different types of professionals you might bring in, there's another crucial distinction we need to clarify for the listener.
The coach versus consultant thing.
Yes. The difference between a business management consultant and a business coach.
That is such a great point, because I see those titles thrown around interchangeably on LinkedIn and networking groups all the time, but they serve completely different functions.
Totally different.
Because a business coach is primarily dealing with the psychology of the owner, right? They handle the mindset, the personal accountability, imposter syndrome.
Keeping the owner motivated.
Yeah, but a consultant handles the actual mechanics, the specific operational systems, the financial structuring, the margins.
Just a really solid breakdown. The absolute best advisors in the world will naturally bring elements of both disciplines to the table, but the sequence of how you apply them matters immensely.
The sequence.
Right. If your revenue is going up and your profit is going down, or if your team is constantly dropping the ball on deliverables, you need a consultant to fix the mechanics long before you need a coach to fix your mindset.
Oh, that makes sense.
Think of it like a marathon runner. Hiring a business coach before fixing your foundational business systems is exactly like hiring a sports psychologist to work on your running form and your competitive mindset when your running shoe has a massive hole in the sole.
You can have the best, most optimized running stride in the world and be mentally tougher than anyone else on the track, but you are still going to get a massive blister.
And eventually have to stop running.
Right, because your foundational equipment is broken. Your mindset can't out-hustle a bad system.
Precisely. The form work and the mental conditioning absolutely matter eventually, but there is a much more urgent mechanical failure to fix first.
Yeah.
Most business owners, when they hit that wall of exhaustion and margin compression, make the mistake of hiring whoever sounds the most confident online.
Or whoever a buddy at the golf course recommended.
Right, or whoever runs the best targeted ads that pop up on a frustrated late-night Google search. The smarter move, the triage move, is to stop, pause the spending, and honestly ask what kind of help the business actually needs before hiring anyone.
So do you need a coach to get out of your own way, a marketing agency to get more leads, or a management consultant to fix the leaky pipes?
Exactly.
So let's assume the business owner listening to this does the smart thing. They realize their shoe has a hole in it. They realize their margins are bleeding out somewhere in the middle of their operation, and they sit down with a business management consultant. What does that diagnostic process actually entail?
It's extremely thorough.
Because the source material outlines these 7 profit levers. And going through this list is basically like holding up a high-definition mirror to the most uncomfortable parts of your business.
It really is.
Let's walk through them in detail. Lever number 1 is pricing. Why is pricing almost always the very first place a management consultant looks?
It's the first place they look, not necessarily because indiscriminately raising prices is always the magic bullet, but because it is almost always the most neglected area of the entire business.
Really? Neglected how?
Well, most independent service business owners haven't looked at their pricing models with fresh, objective eyes in years. If a consultant comes in and runs what we call a 5-minute pricing audit, they usually uncover a fascinating and honestly somewhat tragic psychological trap that the owner has fallen into.
What kind of trap? Are they just mathematically calculating their costs wrong?
It's much deeper than simple math. We call it the habit trap.
They have a trap, okay.
Think about how a business starts. The owners set their initial prices back when the business was in its infancy. They had no portfolio, very little market reputation, and they were desperate to win every single job just to keep the lights on.
Just to prove they could do it.
Exactly. Plus, they were terrified of established competitors who seemed much larger and more organized. So, out of fear and necessity, they picked a safe, low number to ensure they wouldn't lose on price.
Sure, that makes sense when you're starting out.
But here's what happens. As the business survives and grows over the next 5 years, as their team's expertise deepens, as their efficiency improves, and the actual value they deliver increases dramatically, that old fear-based number just sticks around.
Wow.
Over time, that pricing model stops being a calculated strategic decision and just becomes a muscle memory habit. And the fundamental rule here is that habits are not a pricing strategy.
That makes an uncomfortable amount of sense. You just get so used to saying, our service costs this much on sales calls, and the thought of changing it feels terrifying because it risks upsetting the status quo.
Exactly.
Even though your overhead has gone up, your materials cost more, your staff demands higher wages, and your skill level is tenfold what it was when you started up, you are still charging 2019 prices in today's economy.
Which is a massive leak.
So that's the pricing leak. Let's move to lever 2, which is conversion. How do we define conversion in this specific diagnostic context?
Conversion in this context is the strict mathematical percentage of qualified inquiries that actually sign a contract and become paying clients. Okay? And the universal truth across almost all service businesses is that the owner drastically overestimates this number.
Oh, I bet.
If you ask an owner in passing how their sales are going, they'll confidently tell you, oh, if I can just get them on the phone, I close 80% of the people who call me.
Right. Everybody thinks they close 80%.
But when a management consultant actually demands access to the CRM and pulls the raw data applying the true conversion formula, which means dividing every single legitimate lead that entered the ecosystem by the number of cleared deposits.
What does that supposed 80% close rate actually look like?
It is almost always sitting somewhere between 30 and 40%.
That is a massive discrepancy.
Yeah.
So when the owner realizes that more than half of their leads are dying on the vine, what's their immediate reaction? Because that's got to be a huge ego hit.
It is a huge ego hit, which is exactly why the blame game immediately starts.
Ah, of course.
The owner instantly deflects and blames the marketing strategy. They'll point at the agency or the ad platform and say, the leads are garbage. These people are just tire kickers. We need to fire the marketing agency and find someone who can get us better leads.
But the consultant would argue that the marketing agency isn't actually the problem in that scenario.
Exactly. The real gap is almost never the fundamental quality of the lead, assuming the ads are even remotely targeted correctly. The massive bleeding gap is usually hiding in the middle of the funnel.
The middle, not the top.
Right. It's found in the mechanics of the follow-up process, or how that very first discovery conversation is structured. Consider consumer behavior if a prospect submits a form on your website and your team takes 3 days to return that call, that prospect has already hired your competitor.
Well, without a doubt.
Or let's say you have a great initial call, you send over a detailed proposal, and then you just passively sit back and wait for them to respond. Never instituting a structured follow-up cadence. You are leaving massive amounts of money on the table.
In those scenarios, you aren't losing to bad marketing. You are losing to bad operational mechanics,
You paid to acquire the lead, and then you fumbled the ball on the 1-yard line.
which naturally leads us perfectly into lever 3, retention.
Mm.
Once we finally get them through the door and sign the contract, how long are we actually keeping them in the ecosystem?
This is huge.
I mean, I've seen the statistics on this everywhere, but it never stops being a shocking reality check. Acquiring a brand new client costs 5 to 7 times more in marketing dollars, sales time, and onboarding friction than retaining an existing one.
Retention is the ultimate hidden revenue lever, and it is the one that most heavily impacts long-term profitability. Think about the culture of a typical sales-driven organization.
Okay.
Businesses become completely obsessed with the front door. They celebrate the new client wins, they ring a literal brass bell in the sales bullpen, send out congratulatory Slack messages when a contract is signed.
Right, it's very visible.
But simultaneously, they completely ignore the back door, where existing, previously loyal clients are quietly walking out of neglect or inconsistent service.
Wow.
If you focus the majority of your energy and capital solely on acquisition, without building a bulletproof, proactive retention strategy, you are just filling a bucket with a massive hole in the bottom.
You're running on a treadmill,
Yeah.
working incredibly hard, spending a fortune on ads, just to maintain your current baseline revenue.
Exactly. It's exhausting.
It sounds utterly exhausting, and it's a perfect segue into lever 4, cost management. Now, I have to ask you to clarify this, because when business owners and their teams hear cost management, they instantly get defensive.
They absolutely do.
They picture some ruthless corporate hatchet man coming into the office with a clipboard, ready to slash the coffee budget, downgrade the health insurance, fire half the admin team just to juice the margins. What does a healthy diagnostic cost audit actually look like?
That is the stereotype for sure. But a true business management consultant is not there to perform blind, morale-destroying cuts. Cost management, when done correctly, is simply about auditing the return on investment of every dollar leaving the business.
Okay.
A good consultant will come in and aggressively categorize the company's expenses into 2 distinct buckets. First, you have your productive costs.
Productive costs. What does that mean in practice?
These are the expenses that actively build the business, improve efficiency, or drive revenue. For example, a piece of project management software that saves your ops team 10 hours of manual data entry a week. That is a productive cost.
Okay, that makes sense.
A highly skilled, well-compensated account manager who handles client onboarding beautifully and increases your retention rate. Productive cost. You absolutely want to keep and sometimes even increase those expenditures.
Right, because they pay for themselves.
Exactly. But then you have the second bucket, which we call familiar costs.
Familiar costs. That sounds like a polite term for a very insidious problem. How do you define a familiar cost?
Familiar costs are the silent killers of profit margins. These are expenses that have just been sitting on the general ledger for so long that they feel permanent to the owner.
Oh, I see where this is going.
It's the expensive software subscription that the team hasn't logged into since 2023 because they switched to a different platform, but nobody remembered to cancel the old one.
Right.
It's the expensive office space that you are still leasing, even though half your team transitioned to remote work 2 years ago. It's the legacy Yellow Pages ad or the local magazine sponsorship that automatically renews every January because it always has.
Even though it hasn't generated a trackable lead in half a decade.
Exactly. Proper cost management is about identifying those familiar costs, ruthlessly eliminating them, and immediately converting that wasted capital back into bottom line profit.
That brings us to lever 5. And this is the one that might genuinely bruise some egos. We are looking at team and staffing efficiency.
This is a big one.
When a consultant looks at the organizational chart of a struggling service business, Who do they usually identify as the most expensive, most inefficient person in the entire company?
Without fail, in almost every owner-operated service business, the most expensive operational bottleneck is the owner themselves.
And the irony is, they are usually the hardest working person in the building.
By far.
But because their time is inherently the most valuable asset the company has, because they're the visionary, the chief rainmaker, the ultimate problem solver, what are they usually found doing instead of those high-level tasks?
They are usually found buried under a mountain of low-level, easily delegable administrative work.
Yeah.
You will find the CEO of a $2 million company spending 3 hours on a Tuesday answering generic inbox emails. You'll find them tweaking the formatting and font choices on a routine client proposal.
Or driving 20 minutes across town to physically pick up office supplies because they just wanted to get out of the building.
Exactly. And this happens because the owner falls into the classic entrepreneurial trap. They truly believe that it's faster, easier, and safer to just do the task themselves than to spend the time training someone else to do it to their exact standard.
Right. If you want it done right, do it yourself.
But here is the critical insight that shifts the entire paradigm. An owner who is constantly forced to do low-level work does not have a people problem. They have a design problem.
Wait, let's pause right there. It's a design problem. Explain how that reframes the owner's frustration. Because usually the owner's just complaining that they can't find good help or that nobody cares as much as they do.
Right, but if the owner has to step in to fix formatting on a proposal, it means they have failed to design a standard operating procedure, an SOP, that dictates exactly how proposals should look.
Okay.
If they have to answer routine emails, it means they haven't built an FAQ database or a communication protocol for their administrative assistant to follow. They haven't built a system that allows their team to succeed without the owner physically holding their hand.
So blaming the team is really a defense mechanism.
Totally. The reality is that the operational design of the business is fundamentally flawed, forcing the most expensive asset, the owner's time, to plug the holes.
That is a tough pill to swallow, but an incredibly necessary one. Let's move to lever 6, strategic partnerships. Now, this seems like a completely different gear than the internal auditing we've been discussing.
It is. It's much more external.
Because the source material notes this is perhaps the most underutilized lever of all, describing it as the absolute fastest path to new revenue with zero marketing spend. How does an owner actually generate significant revenue? The notes even mention $100K without spending a dime on ads. What does that ecosystem look like in practice?
Well, it requires a massive shift in how you view your customer's journey.
Okay.
Instead of trying to find your ideal client out in the wild through cold advertising, you have to map the ecosystem around your client's needs.
Ecosystem.
The core question you have to ask yourself is this: who serves my exact ideal client immediately before they realize they need my services, and who serves them immediately after my services are complete?
Give me a tangible example of that.
Let's say you run a high-end luxury residential painting company. Your ideal clients are wealthy homeowners. Now, who serves that specific client immediately before they need a painter?
Probably a high-end remodeling contractor who just finished tearing down walls. Or maybe a luxury real estate agent who just sold the home to a new buyer who wants to update the colors.
Exactly, and who serves them immediately after you are done painting.
Perhaps a boutique interior designer who comes in to stage the furniture, or a high-end residential cleaning service that specializes in post-construction cleanup.
Right. Now, if you, as the painting company owner, stop spending thousands of dollars a month on Google Ads fighting for cold clicks, and instead you spend your time building systematic, structured, mutually beneficial referral relationships with those adjacent providers, the contractors, the real estate agents, the interior designers, you create a continuous pipeline of highly qualified, high-trust leads.
That's brilliant.
And because those leads were essentially warm introductions from trusted vendors, your conversion rate skyrockets and your customer acquisition cost drops to absolute zero.
That is such a powerful leverage point. You are no longer trying to create traffic. You are simply intercepting the traffic that's already organically moving through your local market.
Precisely.
Okay, let's look at the final piece of the diagnostic. Lever 7. Systems and operations.
No.
This sounds like the ultimate stress test for the viability of any business.
It is the ultimate litmus test. When a consultant gets to this lever, the fundamental question they will ask the owner is this: are your core operational processes actually written down, and are they runnable by someone other than you?
The dreaded question.
Let me put it another way. If you, the owner, were to get terribly sick, or if you decided to turn off your phone and take a month-long vacation to Hawaii, does the business survive, continue to serve clients, and generate profit? Or does it instantly grind to a halt within 48 hours?
And if the honest answer is that it grinds to a halt, if invoices don't get sent, if proposals don't get written, if client emergencies don't get handled, what does that actually mean for the owner?
It means you have to face the hard truth. You haven't actually built a business yet.
Ouch.
What you have built is a very demanding, highly stressful, utterly inflexible job that just happens to have a corporate entity name attached to it.
Wow.
You are the critical point of failure for every single process. And that is exactly why busy businesses stay broke. They completely lack the standard operating procedures, the checklists, and the automated workflows that separate the owner's personal, physical energy from the company's financial output.
Okay, we have walked through the comprehensive diagnostic theory of these 7 levers, but I want to see what this actually looks like when the rubber meets the road.
Let's do it.
Because I want to share a composite story that is detailed in the source material because it illustrates this entire dynamic perfectly.
It's a great example.
So paint this picture in your mind. It is a local service business. On paper, if you looked at their profit and loss statement from a distance, they are absolutely crushing it.
Right.
Top-line revenue is growing consistently year over year. The team is constantly busy. The branded trucks are all over town. The office phones are ringing off the hook. If you are a competitor looking at them from the outside, you'd think, wow, they have made it. They figured out the secret.
But behind closed doors, it is a totally different, much darker reality.
It's the classic illusion of success. It's a facade that hides massive operational anxiety.
Exactly. Because behind those closed doors, despite the massive revenue numbers, the actual bottom line profit was shrinking every single quarter.
The owner was physically exhausted, working 70-hour weeks, and learning the absolute hardest lesson in entrepreneurship: busy and profitable are not the same thing.
They are definitely not.
So naturally, because they were conditioned to believe in that volume myth we talked about, the owner's knee-jerk reaction was to lean on that old assumption. They thought, our margins are tight, so we just need more volume to outrun our expenses.
Right.
They were literally in the process of shopping for a more expensive, aggressive internet marketing service to generate a higher volume of leads.
And this is the critical juncture where the business management consultant steps in to run the exact diagnostic we just spent time talking about.
Right.
The consultant hits pause on the new ad spend, demands access to the CRM, pulls the historical data, and the reveal is staggering. The consultant finds that the conversion rate on existing inquiries, the leads that the business was already paying good money to generate, was completely stuck at 35%.
Now, to a layperson, 35% might sound okay. If 1 out of 3 people who call you buys your service, that doesn't sound disastrous on the surface. But context is everything here.
Context is everything. In their specific industry category, analyzing their local market and their service offering, a well-run, operationally sound business should have been converting those leads at 60%.
60%.
That 25% delta is where all of their missing profit was hiding. This was the massive aha moment for the owner. They weren't losing the battle at the top of the funnel. The marketing was actually working.
People were interested, picking up the phone, submitting web forms, asking for quotes.
But the business was losing the battle in the middle of the funnel. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential revenue were simply disappearing into the ether because there was absolutely no structured sales process.
So when the consultant found that 25% gap,
Yeah.
they obviously didn't authorize the new website build. They didn't tell the owner to launch a massive new Facebook ad campaign. What did the actual 90-day fix look like? How did they plug that specific hole?
The 90-day fix was almost deceptively simple, and more importantly, it was completely free to implement. It wasn't a software platform, it was a behavioral change. They built a highly structured, mandatory follow-up process for the sales team. They created a system that dictated exactly what happened the moment a new lead came in.
Like step by step.
Exactly. It specified that the lead must be called within 15 minutes. It provided a script for what was said on day 1, an email template for day 3, and a text message check-in for day 7.
Wow.
They completely plugged the hole in the middle of the funnel by simply forcing the team to follow up professionally. And within 90 days, the entire financial trajectory of the business completely changed.
That's incredible.
Margins expanded, profit returned, and they didn't have to spend an extra dollar on marketing. They just captured the invisible money that was already flowing through their hands.
It is so incredibly common to hear stories like that. And honestly, if we put ourselves in the owner's shoes, it makes total psychological sense why they fall into this trap in the first place. Throwing money at top-of-funnel marketing feels seductive.
It feels like taking aggressive action. Right. You hire a flashy agency, review creative ad copy, look at impressive vanity metrics on a dashboard, and you feel like you're actively attacking the problem of growth.
Yeah.
Conversely, sitting down in a quiet room to fix the boring, tedious middle-of-the-funnel follow-up workflows, or writing an SOP for how to answer the phone, that does not give you that same entrepreneurial dopamine hit.
No, it doesn't. But it is infinitely more profitable.
So true.
That is the absolute core of the issue.
Yeah.
Human nature draws us to the shiny new initiative. We want the silver bullet, but the real generational wealth in a service business is almost always hiding in the unglamorous, disciplined optimization of the things we are already doing.
So for you listening right now, wherever you are, whether you're driving to a job site or sitting in your office looking at a spreadsheet, I want you to do an honest self-assessment. I want you to keep a mental tally as we walk through these 5 specific signs.
Let's do it. If you find yourself nodding along to these, it is a strong indicator that you might actually be playing this exact game of outrunning your inefficiency, and that you might desperately need a business management consultant to come in and help you find your invisible money. Let's go through them. Sign number 1. Your revenue is growing steadily, but your actual profit is not.
This is perhaps the most glaring red flag on the dashboard. If your top-line revenue is going up, meaning you are serving more clients, processing more transactions, doing more physical work, but your bank account balance at the end of the month stays exactly the same.
Or worse, get smaller.
Right. It means your operational costs are scaling much faster than your margins can support. As we discussed with the volume myth, every single new client you add brings in gross revenue, but they also add administrative work, operational drag, customer support needs, overhead.
It just builds up.
If your foundational business design is flawed, or if your pricing is too low, adding more clients just compounds the bleeding. You aren't scaling a successful business. You're just scaling a broken model.
Sign number 2. You cannot step away from the business. If the mere thought of taking a 1-week family vacation where you completely turn off your email feels infinitely more stressful than just staying in the office and working 60 hours, tally a point for yourself.
This point connects directly back to the systems lever we discussed earlier. If the business requires your constant personal physical presence just to function on a daily basis, it means the business runs entirely on the knowledge stored inside your brain rather than on documented, replicable processes.
Yeah.
The downstream symptoms of this usually manifest as severe chronic burnout. You feel like you can never truly rest, even on the weekends, because the phantom tether to the office is always pulling at your attention.
You can never unplug.
And what's fascinating is that owners often misdiagnose this. They think it's a personal time management problem.
Oh, totally. If I just wake up at 4 a.m.
Right. If I buy a better productivity planner, I'll finally catch up. But it's not a time management problem.
Yeah.
You can't outmanage a lack of structure. It is a pure systems problem.
I feel like a lot of incredibly hardworking people just mentally checked that box and felt a little sting of recognition. Okay, let's move to sign number 3. Your pricing feels deeply uncomfortable to raise. We touched on the habit trap earlier, but why is this such a paralyzing psychological block for so many talented operators?
It stems entirely from how the business was born and the early survival instincts of the owner. When the idea of implementing a 10 or 15% price increase feels physically uncomfortable, it usually indicates that the current price schedule was set simply to win the job and avoid rejection.
Rather than mathematically engineered to accurately reflect the premium value being delivered to the client.
Exactly. Over time, that fear of rejection creates a deeply ingrained culture of people-pleasing within the business. The business owner becomes absolutely terrified that a minor price increase will cause all of their legacy clients to flee to a competitor.
But what do they consistently fail to realize?
That this pathological people-pleasing is literally costing them tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in lost net profit. Without realizing it, they are subsidizing their clients' businesses with their own personal profit margins.
Wow. Subsidizing their clients' businesses with your own margins. That is a brilliantly painful way to frame it. If you're barely scraping by while providing premium service to a client who is thriving, you are essentially functioning as an unpaid investor in their success.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Let's look at sign number 4.
Mm.
You are losing clients that you know you should definitely be keeping. The back door of the business is wide open.
When you look at systemic retention issues, when good clients just stop calling or slowly drift away to competitors, business owners often panic and assume the worst about their core offering.
They think, oh no, my product must be terrible. My service must be outdated.
But in reality, it is rarely a fundamentally bad product that drives people away, assuming you have some level of baseline competence. What actively drives clients away is an inconsistent product. Think of a restaurant. If you go to a steakhouse and the food is amazing one night, but completely raw and terrible the next, you stop going. You don't trust them.
Right.
In a service business, sometimes the service is amazing because the owner handled it personally, but sometimes it's sloppy because a new employee rushed it. Sometimes the communication is fast and responsive, and other times it's total radio silence for 3 days.
And inconsistency is?
Inconsistency, every single time you encounter it, is simply a systems problem operating in disguise. It means the company relies on the mood of the employees rather than the rigidity of a checklist.
Okay, the final sign on the self-assessment, sign number 5. You spend far more time actively doing the technical work of the business than you do actually running the business. You are out there personally turning the wrench, designing the graphic logo, or writing the code, instead of steering the ship, analyzing the financials, and building those strategic partnerships we talked about.
We call this the curse of the technician. If you are still doing the primary technical work, the harsh reality is that the business hasn't been fully built yet. You haven't created a company. You are the company.
Yeah.
And because there is only one of you, and you only have 24 hours in a day, that reliance on your personal labor puts an absolute concrete hard ceiling on your growth and your profit potential.
Because you literally cannot scale a company beyond your own physical capacity to do the work.
Until you transition from being the primary technician to being the architect of the system, your income will always be capped by your exhaustion.
Now, to be completely fair and totally objective here, because we want to provide nuanced advice, there is a crucial caveat to everything we've discussed today.
Yes, very important.
We've spent the last chunk of time talking about complex operational structures, SOPs, diagnostic consulting, margin analysis. But who does this advice absolutely not apply to? Who should ignore this entirely?
That is an incredibly important counterpoint, and it brings us back to the triage analogy. If your business is brand new, let's say it's under 2 years old, or if you currently have fewer than 6 to 8 active paying clients, you need to completely stop worrying about complex organizational structure.
Put away the SOP templates.
Exactly. Stop worrying about management consultants and standard operating procedures. At that early, fragile stage of a business, your absolute singular priority is simply getting more of the right clients through the front door.
You desperately need cash flow, market feedback, and proof of concept.
Building a complex SOP for a business that has no customers is a sophisticated form of procrastination.
Oh, that's good.
A good, ethical business management consultant will listen to your situation, tell you to put away your wallet, advise you to go hustle and network to get some clients, and tell you to come back to them when things actually start breaking from the stress of growth.
If you are in that early foundational phase, you don't need expensive consulting. You need guidance. Organizations like SCORE are fantastic, completely free resources that pair you with retired executives to help you get off the ground without spending your limited capital.
That's a great resource.
So that's a vital distinction, and I'm glad we made it. You don't need a high-level management consultant to help you organize a business that doesn't have any revenue yet.
Right.
But if you have successfully passed that 2-year survival mark, if you have a steady stream of clients, and if you found yourself checking off a few of those 5 signs we just went through, maybe your margins are tight, maybe you can't take a vacation, maybe you're terrified to raise prices, it brings us to the foundational philosophy of this entire deep dive.
Yes.
The core paradigm-shifting belief that we really want you to take away today is this. The fastest, most reliable path to generating more profit in your business is almost never authorizing more marketing spend.
It really is a complete paradigm shift from how we are taught to operate. We are heavily conditioned by business culture to believe that growth always requires addition.
We think we need to add new services, add new marketing channels, hire more staff, add more software.
Add more hours to our already exhausting work week.
Yeah.
But true, Sustainable business growth, the kind of growth that creates lasting profitability and actual personal freedom for the owner, almost always comes from the discipline of subtraction.
Subtraction over addition.
It is about aggressively stopping what isn't working. It is far more powerful and far more profitable to stop doing the low-margin custom work, to stop accepting bad-fit clients who drain your team's energy, and to stop paying for familiar costs that yield no return than it is to blindly double down on launching new initiatives.
I want the listener to really imagine what the other side of that discipline subtraction looks like. Let's paint that picture of the promised land. Imagine it's a Tuesday morning. You are sitting at your desk, enjoying your second cup of coffee before the chaos of the day has even fully started. The office is relatively calm. You open up your laptop to a simple, clean dashboard that shows you just three key vital metrics.
Perhaps your conversion rate, your profit margin, and your retention rate.
Exactly. And all three of those numbers are steadily moving up. Your team is out there doing the actual client work, executing it perfectly, without you needing to micromanage a single step because they have clear systems to follow. And that familiar, terrifying Sunday afternoon mental math panic where you are trying to figure out how to make payroll.
It's completely gone.
Completely gone.
And that isn't a utopian fantasy. That isn't something reserved only for Fortune 500 companies. That is simply what an independent service business looks like when the underlying operational foundation is finally repaired and respected.
And going back to that real-world story of the business that fixed its 35% conversion rate with a simple, free follow-up system, the craziest, most ironic part of that entire scenario is that they could have afforded to just spend more money on marketing.
They absolutely could have.
They had the cash flow available. Nothing was physically stopping them from just buying more ads and papering over the problem.
They had the budget to make the wrong decision. But, as Ryan Herrst's dad used to say, and it is a quote that perfectly encapsulates this entire philosophy, all because you can doesn't mean you should.
All because you can doesn't mean you should.
Just because you have the top-line cash flow to paper over a broken, inefficient system with expensive marketing doesn't mean it's the right strategic move for the long-term health of your business.
That perfectly sums it up. It is a lesson in restraint and operational maturity. Before we wrap up this episode by inviting the listener into a collaborative research project, tell them that Ryan Herrst is currently interviewing service business owners for his book, Profit Foundation. He's looking for industry insights, real-world perspectives from people running owner-operated service businesses. If they want to help shape the book and be part of the research, tell them to call or text Ryan directly at 517-955-2154. If they participate, they'll receive a free copy of the book when it is published. Just a 45-minute conversation where their experience and insights genuinely matter.
And before you go, think about this. What if the very thing you are working the absolute hardest on in your business right now is actually the exact thing capping your growth? If you were forced to stop doing the work for just 1 week and only design the work, what invisible money would suddenly become visible to you?